I think we'll get started and respect everybody's time. Thank you everybody for coming. For those, I think I got to at least greet everybody who's coming in. My name is Brian Hubbard, and I am 5 weeks in as the Chief of Police here in Crystal. After a bunch of years in the Deputy Chief role. What we're going to do tonight, we're going to kind of start a little bit high level, and then we're going to get specific to the community notification, and then we're going to go back high level about notification. That's how we're going to do this tonight. And I will start. Hopefully most of you have seen the letter that was put out. What I will just start by saying, without lining with a whole bunch of stuff, is my apologies to all of you for our misstep in how this all came about. I will just tell you that there was no ill intention. And again, I won't slice it for you, but to say I appreciate those of you who reached out to let me know that, or to let us know that. My expectation for our team, that I have said since I've been here, is that our expectation is that we meet the community where they're at and with what they need. And so clearly, what we were doing was wrong. I won't say it was wrong, but it was not okay. It was not what the community was looking for. That message has been heard. And again, I appreciate everybody letting me know that. I often say when people call to complain about something, to be frustrated about an officer's conduct, oftentimes that comes with, well, I'm sorry for calling, I'm sorry whatever, and my statement is, I can't fix it if I don't know about it. And so I do very much appreciate those that reached out. And I hope you will hear the sincerity of my apology of saying I message received that the expectation for notification happens better moving forward. And I will come back to that point, but I've got two young adult daughters and a young son all trying to find their way. And Mom and I, since the beginning of time, have said, you do things right all the time, and sometimes you do things wrong. And when you do things wrong, you say sorry and you try and do better. And so that's the commitment that I will make on behalf of the department. I'm happy to talk individually with you about how did this come about, but I will just at this point leave it at that, and I'll come back later to talking about broader notification. So I just wanted to start with that. That's not to say that I'm not wanting to hear your feedback on that when we get to that spot later on. I just wanted to start naming that so that everybody recognizes where we're at with this. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to do some notification information, and instead of me deciphering it, I'm turning to the expert to help with this particular offender to give perspective on offenders and this offender, etc. So Brad Vandervet, I'll let him do the introduction, but Brad works with the Department of Corrections. His job is interfacing with agencies, individuals, community members regarding the placement of predatory offenders. And so I figured instead of me trying to decipher the info that I would have Brad do that, and Brad's going to be happy to answer questions, for you to express concerns, things that about this. Again, any notification process stuff, I'm just going to have you hold that because Brad didn't have anything to do with that. I'll take those after, but as it relates to this particular individual, Brad, I'll turn to you, and thank you for being here.
Absolutely, thank you, Chief.
All right, so this presentation is really kind of best designed, I find, in 3 chunks. We really like to set kind of the foundation, the groundwork of how we got to where we are as a state with all the varying components in our broader risk management system, how they work together, how they don't work together sometimes. And then use that information as kind of an overlay as we get into specifics about the man you're here to learn about this evening. So you can kind of use the ideas and research and constructs as you're contemplating him further, and then roll into resources, the what now phase of the meeting, which is probably the most pertinent, is how do I take this very difficult, very upsetting information and put it into some sort of meaningful use for myself, my community, my family, that might help us actually. Okay? So without further ado, as you heard the chief say, you know, one of the big components of notification is predicated on the understanding and knowledge that those who engage in sexual harm exist. They are not new, they are not novel. So the real question is then, what is it we're doing as various agencies across the state, and even beyond, to address those who come through that criminal justice system? And so one of the first components that came online in Minnesota is the registry. Originally known as the sex offender registry, you can see there's this, the statute for that is 243-166. It was born out of the advocacy and work of the Wetterling family following the abduction of their son, Jacob. And if you've lived in Minnesota for any length of time, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That case reverberates in our state DNA. The Wetterling family went to law enforcement at the time of the abduction of their son and said, what more can we do to assist you as agencies in the important work you're doing? And at the time, it really focused on policing those men, particularly, who abduct children. And law enforcement said at the time, what we really need is a system that brings all of our data together. Because at the time, back in the late 80s, any information collected by law enforcement would be retained in their record systems. Usually a file room in the basement of the station, right? And it would be shared with other agencies whenever called upon, but that took time. Somebody had to go down there, access the file, make a copy, fax it, mail it. For those that don't know, ask your mom. But you know, and ultimately get that information to the hands that needed it most. So what we came up with was the registry. So the registry is a way where all that information gets collected and retained now in a centralized location, here with the Minnesota State's Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, or the BCA. This information is vast. We collect, it's grown over the years, but now it's to the point where anybody charged with or convicted of a sex crime goes onto the thing, where it used to just be men who abduct children. We also now collect way more than just like their house. We now know what they drive, where they work, where they go to school, if they have secondary addresses that they frequent, like vacation rentals, family members' homes. That's all made known to law enforcement as well. Scars, marks, tattoos, phone numbers, storage units, you name it. It's all registered. Now the legislature determined that this data is private in nature. It would be only accessible to law enforcement and corrections for the very specific purposes of policing this population. And it remains that way to this day. The registry is not public. The only time a registrant may have their information shared publicly is if they go out of compliance for a set period of time, or if they cross the threshold of prison. I'll explain this in a little bit more. So not everybody's going on to the registry, but for those that do, here's the information we collect and retain. If a registrant fails to comply, let's say law enforcement encounters a registered individual in their community and know that he is operating a motor vehicle that he is not registered as his own, that could potentially be a new felony. Failing to register information could be a felony. And so if this was nefarious and they were operating this vehicle in a manner that law enforcement determined through their investigation to be unsafe, or that they were trying to omit important information, they could get charged out and potentially given a whole new prison sentence for a failure to register. So the consequences are high for compliance. And we currently maintain a very high level of compliance with our registry. We're one of the very highest in the nation with compliance. I mentioned that the registry's grown and changed over the years. It includes now all sex crimes, with the exception of gross misdemeanor, CSC 5, criminal sexual conduct, 5th degree. If you're interested in that, I can explain it more later. But it also includes non-sex specific crimes as well. The legislature saw the benefit of this tool for police to be able to access data quickly and get to people that might be key suspects in moments of crisis. And so we had to change the name from the sex offender registry to the predatory offender registry, because not everybody on it is a sex offender. But the name predatory offender does not evoke a lot of confidence. But do keep in mind that while all sex offenders fall under that umbrella of predatory offender, not everyone probably hits that verbiage correctly. Okay? All right. With the registry, like I said, the information collected and retained on it is for law enforcement purposes only, but for meetings like these, we're able to take kind of a 30,000-foot flyover view of what's going on in and around the state. And I think it's an important first point in our conversation this evening to be sensitized to what are we really talking about here. So as you can see, from the first of this year, we had approximately 19,028 registered individuals. That's all of them. That's those with no risk level assigned, levels 1, 2, and 3. As of this morning around 9, I took snapshots. And this, I want to tell you, these numbers are constantly changing as these folks are moving all the time. But at the time I took that snapshot, out of that 19,000 some, you can see here the number having primary residence within Hennepin County. And then you see that smaller number to the right, for those who can't see it, it's 169. Those are the registrants subject to broad public notification. Those are your level 3 individuals, or those who have been discharged from MSOP, the Minnesota Sex Offender Program, known as civil commitment. They are also subject to this level of notification. So out of that 2994, we get to talk about 169. So when you think about these numbers, I want to really kind of put in your mind an analogy of a funnel. And if you think about the widest end of that funnel, those are sex offenses that occur. And we know from all the data and research on this topic that only a fraction of those offenses even get reported. And that funnel narrows instantly. Of those that do get reported, unfortunately, only a portion of that group may be formally charged by a county attorney. Can we narrow again? And of those charged, only a portion of that group may find that they're convicted for their crime. And we narrow again. And of those convicted, only a portion of that group may enter prison. And I'll explain here in a minute why that's a unique distinction. But by the time we get to the numbers you're looking at tonight, know that we're well down the neck of that funnel, to about 2/3 of the way. The takeaway from this is that broad awareness is just so very important. Those who we've identified are those that we can manage with all our various tools. The more likely thing, as you'll see through the night, is those that we have not identified yet. And that's where we want our awareness at its highest. Everybody good with the numbers? My one critique, everybody's like, Brad, you go too fast on the numbers. We can always come back to them. Good, okay. I'm not like good with the numbers, but I'm good with the numbers. Right? All right, the next big pillar of the broader state risk management systems came online a number of years after the registry, and that is community notification. It's a distinct law separate from the registration law. This law is built on the understanding and knowledge that a well-informed community is in fact a safer community. When these laws were coming online, we started a big study in Minnesota. And I'll talk a little bit more about that coming up. But one of those components from that study was, does the group subject to notification have a mitigated risk versus the group that was not subject to notification? And the conclusion of that study was yes. By shining a light on the lives of those designated individuals, we are leveraging stigma. We are creating an environment that they can no longer formulate relationships of trust, at least not easily. The downside, as everything's got two sides, right, is that we really inhibit their ability to formulate relationships, which further isolates them, which is an aggravating factor. So this is what's born out of the Notification Act. A well-informed community is a safer community. And I thank you all for being here tonight to gain more information. So you heard me talk about notification only applying to those adults who cross the threshold of prison. And real quick aside, I mention adults and emphasize adults because in Minnesota, we register children as young as age 10. A 10-year-old can be a registered predatory offender in our state. And I think right now our youngest is 13. Pretty jarring. And the stigma can have life-lasting impacts, especially on a very placid and changing youth mind. But for the adults, if they go to prison, and any prison will do, any prison in the state, throughout the United States or U.S. territories, military prison, federal prison, or MSOP, the Minnesota Sex Offender Program, This is known as civil commitment. And if you want more information on that, I can share it later, but just to get through. So, if they cross that threshold and they're an adult, they're subject to a risk level assessment and assignment. So juveniles are not, unless they age up and then cross the threshold, and then they may. And those with stayed or probationary sentences. If you've ever heard the terms probation and parole used interchangeably and wondered, what's the deal? Here's the difference. Think of probation as pre-prison and parole as post-prison. So if the court found the individual guilty of their crime and then stayed the sentence, and I always kind of tell the guys when they came onto my supervision, a stay was like a thread kind of hung over their head, and if the court cut that string, then they'd go to prison. That's a stay. So if they have a stayed sentence, meaning they get probation time, there may be some jail time that accompanies that, but the threshold rule applies only to prisons. They are a no level assigned registrant. I want to take a moment and express that that should not give you a lot of confidence, because no level assigned simply means we haven't measured it. Everybody has risk. So no level assigned is you don't have to go through this process as long as you follow the court's rules and successfully complete your time on supervision. If you accomplish that, you remain no level assigned. The duration of registration predominantly is a decade, 10 years, or the duration of supervision, whichever is longer. But many find themselves in lifetime registration situations more and more. And so I'll explain more on that going on. So, adults who haven't gone to prison are no level assigned, not to be confused with no risk, and juveniles. Okay, so I mentioned there was a study, and here's where I get to flex on that just a little bit. I promise, I hope not to bore you. But I think it's one of those really pivotal studies. It's still referenced to this very day in current research on this important topic. This study began in the early 90s when these laws were first coming online, and followed a group of men. Initially, it was 3,166, something like that. You have to forgive me, the numbers escaped me, but right around there, 3,000 plus. Adult males, known sex offenders, all of them, not kidnappers or false imprisonment, but sex offense specific. Over that decade, from the 90s all the way into the early 2000s, when the study concluded initially. And the assessors or the researchers tracked them as they re-entered Minnesota communities, and they marked their successes and they marked their failures, meaning recidivism. Those who went on to re-offend in a same or similar fashion to their governing sex crime. Those who did that, who went on and re-offended, their conduct and behavior became those known predictive risk factors. So when I say to you tonight somebody's a level 1, what I'm really saying is they score in that lower portion against their peer group of known predictive risk factors. A level 2 has a moderate amount, and a level 3 has a higher amount. Now, one thing about risk assessment tools that's important to understand before I go forward today is that risk is dynamic. So what do I mean by that? What I'm saying is that a level 1 designee today, if they are not adhering to the expectations of law enforcement, their supervision agents, the court, the community, may find that they're reassessed and that risk goes up. Just the same as a level 3 designee today, if they show through a lengthy period of adherence to those mitigating strategies, they're reassessed and their risk goes down. So do keep that in mind. Another thing to keep in mind about risk assessment tools is that while they are very good at helping law enforcement and corrections agencies at targeting interventions, enhancing protective factors, and mitigating those aggravating factors, none of them can predict the future. No tool is capable of knowing what might happen. So keep that in mind. So once an assessment's done and a level is assigned, our handoff then goes to our partners in law enforcement. And they provide notification within the scope of the level assigned. So for a level 1, law enforcement will notify.
Brad, you jumped ahead.
Oh, Jiminy Christmas. Sorry, let's start over. Wait, we're on the top. Alright, sorry, here we go. So just make sure you're paying attention. Alright, level 1. I'm over here trying to take a drink and be smooth about it. It didn't work out. Law enforcement's going to notify other law enforcement agencies that may be pertinent. And this happens more often like rural areas where like the sheriff, maybe they live out in the country, and the sheriff does the notification, but we all know they're going to go into town, 2 miles over, or 3 miles over, whatever. So that then that local PD may get a notification on that. 5 miles over, this is little towns. They'll also notify victims of or witnesses to the offense if they've requested that level of enhanced notification. Not all victims want to hear about this dude ever again. So we will not be bringing them up. But if they want to know, they get to know. And then they also notify immediate adult household members in the domicile with that registrant. And so that is the scope of a level 1 notification. If there's children in the home, we also notify Child Protective Services. In fact, if they're on supervision, there's a mandate that they have to notify, regardless of level. So even the no-level sign guys, CPS gets notified if they're living in a home with kids, just so you know. All right, level 2 builds on those individuals and entities and includes additional individuals or entities that law enforcement determines to be at particular risk based on that registrant's known patterns of conduct and behavior. So it's commonly believed with like a 2 that law enforcement's going to notify schools, daycares, churches, place where kids congregate, or risk populations, right? And that very well may be true, but it's not always the case. So take, for example, a level 2 coming into a community, and law enforcement gets the dossier of information from the risk assessment unit and determines that this individual targets their offending conduct and behavior against adult females at bars. This guy puts chemicals in drinks to render victims unconscious. In this scenario, law enforcement may focus or target that notification on the bar owners or their security staff, as say opposed to the local daycare. So that's kind of the nuance with a level 2. And then with a level 3, it's broad public notification. To set the tone, because I know the questions may come later, the mandate is to activate the individual on the Department of Corrections website. Once they've been placed on that website, the statutory requirement has been met. Everything else is value added. That comes in a myriad of different formats and methods, and they change all the time. Because the way that law enforcement communicated with its community back in 1994, 96, 97 is not the same as how they communicate today. And so do bear that in mind as you ask your questions later on tonight. So no notification is made, and then you get the information and figure out, how do I interpret this? So I'm going to transition into that next part of my presentation, the now what. So I know this guy's here, great, right? Something similar. Let's start at the narrowest end of that funnel, all right? The guys that have crossed the threshold, have gotten a risk level assessed and assigned, and are now coming out. Now, year after year, the percentage of folks coming across our threshold does change and fluctuate, but usually what we find, on average, is the breakdowns of risk level assignments look a lot like they do up here. The majority are levels 1 and 2. About 15%, again, on average, hit that level 3 mark. So just another emphasis on broad awareness is key. If you were to go onto my website today and you said, show them all to me, which you can do. You can do it on your phone, it may have changed, but hopefully not. Otherwise my analysts are working over that. Right now, out of the 19,000, we get to have broad conversations about 441. Right? Now, you may think, well, that's a drop in the bucket. And it is, numerically speaking, but content-wise, it's valuable. Because all the representations of the varying ways that those who engage in this type of harm do what they do are represented here. So you can check them out as hard as they are to review, and at least draw some inference. And I encourage you to do that, to to see how are people accessing their victims, how are they manipulating them and managing them, right? 17, as the last count, are out of compliance from that 441. You may think, what's the value in knowing those who you've lost track of, Brad? The answer is, the community is another huge pillar of that broader risk management system. No doubt you'll have contemplated tonight or before that law enforcement, as good as they are, cannot be everywhere all the time. Neither can probation or parole. But the community is omniscient, is ever present. There are eyes and ears everywhere. And even though that 19,000 is a big number, if you took it and put it against the state of Minnesota population, it's not even a decimal point. Which tells me there are far more good people, helpers, healthy, trusted, supportive adults out there than there are those that might engage in harm. Having this information so readily available can create a bubble of a hyper reality. You can start to, this is part of the problem with working in this field. Agents and cops will be like, I have to take a break. Because you just start to, just nobody gets trusted. My daughter says, Dad, can I go to the mall? I'm like, never. Right? My wife's like, you really gotta take a breather, you know? So you get it. And so you gotta be careful and balance it. You know, a room like this tonight, people ask me sometimes, I'm sure they've hit up the chief, you know, how do you do this? And send your kids out into this world. And honestly, the answer sits right here in front of me, right here. There's just so many more people that care, that will stand up if they see something wrong, and that's what makes it possible. So thank you once again for being here. All right, last couple bits of data, but I think I've cherry-picked them. We have all this research in its pure form, and I encourage you to check it out if you're interested. It's on our website, I can get you there. But I kind of pulled out, I think, some of the big, like, kind of aha components to share with you tonight. Now, first, I want to just touch base. If you can see the little bottom here, this research, this was from 2000. Before you go, oh my God, 2000? Just know that this is comprehensive data, and it's still relied upon to this very day, stood upon as being good data to grow new research on. Research has shifted towards online, which makes sense. Mediated relationships. So I just like to acknowledge that before you're like, Brad, you're bringing me old dusty data. It's good data. All right, so the relationships between those who engage in this type of harm and the people they hurt. As you can see, the majority of those out there engaging in this harm are known to the victims. They have relationships of trust that they've built, not only with the victims, but often with their support groups too. Their trusted adult supports. And groomed everybody to become comfortable with their presence, and more importantly, to become comfortable with them having unmonitored access. 7% fall into that stranger category. This man falls into that category. Let's be real clear. But I do want to talk a little bit about that 7%. Because research like this has limitations. Assessors have to determine what is a knowing, what constitutes a relationship. And the deciding factor is, and has been amongst the industry of research on this topic, is that it's 24 hours. 24 hours. If you can't show, as an assessor, that a knowing between the victim and the perpetrator existed of 24 hours or greater, they fall into the stranger bucket. Now, inevitably, you get scenarios like this, where an 18-year-old and a 15-year-old meet up at a social gathering in a private residence. And the evening's going the way it's going, and they hit it off. And they leave the group and go to an isolated location, whether in the home or outside of the home, and the night takes a turn. Now, that would fall into the stranger category. But what we tend to think of more is family, is community. When we think of stranger, is that person lurking, who has ill intent, and they mean to do harm. That group, fortunately, falls into a much smaller percentile, of about 3%. And again, this man falls into that bucket. I'm sorry to say. But I also want you to understand that the vast majority are using relationships of trust to exploit that contact. Less for the data, but I think for me anyway, this one really drives the hardest. As you can see here, this is the age breakdowns of those harmed. We come back to the Minnesota research, but the national data says the same. And if you're anything like me, you glanced at it and you thought, geez, that breakdown is really troubling. And then you really started to look at it. And you started to look at the ages on the side. You see that 2/3 are kids. And then you see the narrowest age range up there, the teens, are 33% of those harmed. That's 9% of the population. That's staggering. What is going on? Well, here's what we know. From all of our data and research, that those kids in those early years, from infancy up to preteen, they're still very much under the caring, watchful oversight of their trusted adult support networks. And so we as agencies seek to get good information into those hands so you can vet the people coming into those kids' lives. So you can ensure that the people that are getting those relationships of trust are worthy of them. But when we get to those teenage years, we run into the very thing we as parents and community want for our kids. And that is for them to go out into their environment and explore and express their autonomy. And our kids deserve every bit of that. But it is what makes them vulnerable. Because now they're formulating relationships of trust outside of that watchful oversight. And so what we used to do, the old model, was the talk. Some of us may remember this. Where mom, dad, trusted adult pulled us aside at that critical age and maybe removed the veil just enough to show us that the world was not as safe as it had been made to be for us when we were younger. And what we found was with that method or model, we got one of two very common reactions. Either our kids would say, Dad, you're overreacting. Your friends are fine, thank you very much. See you tomorrow. Or on the flip side, they would freak out. They'd become so fearful that they would withdraw from the very things that they grow to love in their lives. Neither reaction is what we're seeing. So we've learned over the years that a lot of little talks, age appropriate in their design, that grow with the child. Because we understand that scared kids don't equal safe kids. But we also need our kids to know that nice people don't equal safe people. And so I'll have some resources as you're thinking about how to have those conversations with those in your lives. But I want to shift gears and speak to you now about the man you're here to work about. Use this information as an overlay. See where things may align and see where they diverge. This is Whaid Al-Hamid, otherwise known as Ricky Caffey Jr. He's registered as Ricky Caffey Jr., but all his court stuff says Whaid Al-Hamid. He goes by Ricky in most of his complaints, so I'm going to refer to him as Ricky as I go forward, but just know that these are both commonly used aliases. I want to speak to photographs. Photographs are updated on average of annually, or if the registrant were to significantly modify or change their appearance. So if you were to see this individual or anybody who's registry involved that you know of, and they no longer look like their photographs, let us know if corrections is involved, because agents are going to have the most constant direct contact. We will obtain updated photos, get them onto the registry where I will get them, and then I will get them onto that website, so you will always have an accurate photograph of this individual for as long as he is subject to notification like this. These are Ricky's vitals. He's 61 years of age and residing at the 5900 block of Quail Avenue North. I want to take a moment and address a question that commonly comes up in meetings like this. And I don't doubt right now that there's a good chunk of you that knows exactly where he lives, and that is just fine. But what people will ask, if they don't know, stick around, you'll find out. But if you don't know, the reason why we provide proximals, quite frankly, is vigilantism. Every year, we suffer vigilantism as a result, at least in part, because we're putting this information out there. probably every 3 to 4 years being sued, that this process exceeds the judicial intent, the expectations of the law, that this is punitive, is meant to punish and shame them further. One of the arguments they use against notification is that by Brad putting this information up here, people hurt him or his loved ones or damage his property. And every time that occurs, that argument gets stronger. Right now I got the court going with me. They're on team notification. But the next house that catches on fire, the next guy that gets beat to death, that argument gets harder and harder to maintain. And the court will eventually grow weary. And they will say that the benefits of notification no longer outweigh the costs, Brad. You're back out in the field checking on these guys at midnight. Thanks, everybody. No. But this is why we use proximals. Now, there's little doubt in my mind, again, that everyone in here, or nearly everyone in here, and therefore everyone in here, will know where he lives. And that's just fine. That is just fine. We just don't want that information to proliferate broadly, to where people who have no stake in what goes on here in your community are coming in and exacting some revenge scenario that does nothing to restore a victim. It does nothing to mitigate risk. And it only serves to disrupt the very thing you've worked so hard to achieve here in your community. This is why we use proxies. Okay, criminal history. This individual, if you're aware of him or if you've looked him up, has a robust criminal history. We're not going to go into all that detail tonight. The reason why is because notification is predicated on registration. And so we focus on those registrable patterns of conduct and behavior. That's how we address risk. That's how we do notification. If you're interested in his full criminal history, it is available to you. It is public. And I encourage you to check it out. But I just want to address that up front. If you're like, well, Brad, why are you talking about all the other stuff? We're focusing in on registration stuff. Okay. If you want it, I'll actually have a website where you can see his full criminal history at the end of this, if you're interested in it. Okay, so this is verbatim off the fact sheets you've been provided. So let's get into the details of what occurred. So you can use them to build those safety plans around. In 2006, Ricky was convicted of assault second degree with a weapon and burglary first degree out of Ramsey County. These are not registrable offenses. Why is he registered? You'll see right below, I wrote that he had an attempted criminal sexual conduct second degree charge. In Minnesota, we will put you on the registry even if you're not convicted of a sex crime specifically, because we understand the plea process can be murky. The best legal system money can buy. You get a guy that's been charged with criminal sexual conduct first degree, and magically through the result of a pinstripe suit wearing, attorney, gets it pled down to a domestic. Well, we want him. He needs to be here. And so this is what catches that. So that's what happened here with Ricky. In this crime, he had done exactly as that charge indicates, attempted to engage in sexual harm. This contact or conduct was against a 46-year-old woman whom he did not know. A stranger, a true stranger. He met her, it was early in the morning, it's hard to tell from the reports just how early. Law enforcement got involved around 6 a.m. So it was sometime prior to that. She was waiting at a bus stop to get a ride, and she had been told by the cab company, if I'm recalling correctly, it would be over an hour for a cab to get to her. Lo and behold, Ricky shows up in his vehicle and says, hey, I'll give you a ride home. Super nice guy. She climbs in his car. They go home. She says, I'd like to pay you for your trouble. And proceeds to go into her apartment and follows. He enters her apartment, where she then goes into the restroom of her apartment. And as she comes out, she's struck with an object. That's the weapon part. We're not sure what she was struck with. She doesn't remember. She gets struck and then assaulted. She fights. He flees. Law enforcement gets involved. And for this crime, he received, because he was convicted of the assault and the burglary, 60-month commit and a 9-month commit. Now I'm going to take a beat and explain another question that will often come up in meetings like this. And that is, why do people that engage in this kind of harm come out? What are we doing? And the answer is in part to determinate sentencing, we have a more familiar model of parole. It's popularized in TV and movies, where an individual who's gone to prison to serve a term, once they hit a certain threshold of time, goes before a panel to basically plead with them and say, hey, can I serve the rest of my time out in the community? And that board or panel would determine whether or not they could, so they could then begin rebuilding their lives. Now, as you might well imagine, for those particularly who had heinous personal crimes, that parole board was less than interested in their getting out early. And what would happen is they would sit the entirety of their sentence. Now, I'm betting in this room tonight, ain't nobody got a problem with that. He can sit every day he's got coming and then some he earned. But what we found from our data and research was that this did not impact recidivism, reoffending in the same or similar fashion. These men would languish in the facility, be disengaged, and then they will expire. I'll take a moment to tell you right now, that in Minnesota, our current incarcerated population, 90% actually better than that, are going to be released. They will re-enter our communities. And so we found it prudent to have a better plan for how to engage these men before they just get dumped out and walk to the gate at that expiration date and told don't come back because it wasn't working. So what we use now is determinate sentencing. It's set by law. The legislature says how long a sentence will be. Not a judge, not a jury, not a panel, not law enforcement, not corrections, not anybody. The law. The way they do this is through the Sentencing Guidelines Commission. It's a great thing to look into and read more about. Check them out. I honestly think they're one of the best forms of information on our current criminal justice system. The commission must have on it every year. They convene and they determine the duration of sentences for crimes enumerated in Minnesota law. Fun, right? Every year. On that board must sit a victim of a person crime every year. So we always have a voice from somebody who's been directly impacted by person-on-person harm. So that commission at this year, 2006, determined that for these crimes as enumerated, these were your terms. Why are they broken down into weird months and not given as years? Because it's Brad proof. Because if they go to prison, they must serve 2/3 in and 1/3 out. This just helps me with my fractions. Not great at it. So 2/3 in by law, 1/3 out. In the community on supervised release, no ifs, ands, or buts. Probation, parole, whatever you want to call them, is there to catch on the back end with their partners in law enforcement. All right. And then I wrote on there consecutive because you can also see, sometimes you see them as back-to-back, concurrent. These were not. It's just a sentencing metric. So the big one takes over, basically. So 60 months. 2/3 in, 1/3 out. The little 9 falls underneath all that. Okay. But the story's not over for Ricky here. 2017, he comes back in front of law enforcement for criminal sexual conduct, 4th degree, again out of Ramsey County. This offense was against a 33-year-old female whom he did not know. He encountered her, it was around 6-7 p.m., waiting for a bus. And she was sitting on the bench, and he gave her his, like a bus pass. That was an act of kindness to her. She interpreted this as like a kind gesture of his. And she proceeded to fall asleep on the bench. And he assaulted her. She woke up. She contested his assault. He ran over to the side. Her boyfriend showed up to pick her up, had some words with him. He took off. Law enforcement encountered him a little further away. For this crime, he received a 120-month commitment. Now, that's a big jump from 60. There's obviously some criminal history in between here because the state system's ratchet. And so this kind of is a tell for you that more is going on with Ricky than just these offenses. He's got a real significant criminal history. He's a violent man. So this crime, 120-month commit with a 10-year conditional release period. So the state tacks on an enhancer So not only do you do your 2/3 in, 1/3 out, but that final third gets extended another decade. And actually that's gone up now to 15 years to get to work with me on the receiving side, on the community side. Transitioning back. Now this sentence was stayed by the court for 10 years, probation. The court saw fit to place him on probation and not execute the file. He served his term of probation and was ultimately completed in 2021. So he never crossed the threshold of prison. However, he's been across the threshold. And I'll talk about that here in a minute. So we still reassessed him, and this still got weighted, as it should, in his risk assessment. So that's his second registrable offense. His first actual CSC conviction. All right, so his prison chronology. Here's how it breaks down. So in 06, he comes in. Remember, for that assault in Berg, they dropped that attempted CSC. He gets assessed by the end of confinement review committee and assigned a risk level 3 out of the gate for that first one. And in March of 2015, he expires. He served his time. For my number crunchers, remember they give credit for time served from the date of offense forward. So all that jail time is applied to his overall time. He comes back in 2020. This is for a non-sex specific egg rob, and that's what he's currently working on right now out of Ramsey County. So again, you get an idea of what his history tends to focus on. He gets reassessed. Anybody that's on registry who has a risk assessment, no matter what brings them back into our institution, we look at them. Why did you come back? And we determine whether or not that risk needs to be increased or decreased, but let's face it, if they're coming back, it's probably going up. You may wonder, is there anywhere to go after 3, Brad? 3 is the top. We have, that's where civil commitment comes in. So we also, when reviewing individuals, will make referrals to the county attorney for potential civil commitment. To be civilly committed as a sexual predator, you have to be diagnosed by an assessor as either being sexually psychopathic or sexually dangerous. And so the conduct has to meet certain criteria. And then that would be an indiscriminate commitment. We have different types of commitments for other kinds of mental illnesses, but those are the ones that get you put in the SOP. So he came out in December onto intensive supervised release. Any level 3 coming onto the community must be on ISR. This is another enhancer. ISR, oh, hold on. I'll talk about ISR after this next slide. I guess I want to break up my flow. So here's where things sit with him as we talk today. He is under correctional supervision until 2026. So he expires on that file, that Ramsey County file, in October. And then his rights will be restored to him, and he will be permitted to live as any other citizen would, with the exception of registration. He will register for life. Law enforcement will always know where he lives, where he works, where he drives, etc. And for as long as he retains that risk level 3, and I'll tell you right now, he can't go down because of the secondary conviction. He's locked in. So he'll never get to go down. He's not right now, the way the law's written. So he'll always know, as long as he's in Minnesota, where he lives, where he works. We'll know where he lives. The proximals. Law enforcement will know the rest. Okay, ISR. He is under intensive supervised release. It is just as the title would lead you to conclude. For somebody on ISR to engage in the community outside of their own home, they're on basically house arrest. For them to go out in the community to seek jobs, to attend treatment, to engage in physical activity, they do get to get out and engage in physical fitness activities. All of that has to be pre-approved. Nothing can be done impulsively. If he does not have a plan for it, he will be in violation and potentially returned to the institution for correctional time. So if he's out on a walk and you see him, you question the route he's taking, seems problematic, seems like it might be a risk, contact the agent, share your concerns. Agents will not approve walking routes that will put him by places that could be potentially risky. I understand there's some paths around here in the area. I would highly suspect that he won't be allowed to go in there. Yeah.
It's 900 feet from where he lives.
So if he's gonna go on a walk, the agent's got to determine where he's gonna go, the route he's gonna take, and they'll check.
Telling me he's living alone, not supervised?
He's on supervision, he's on ISR.
There's nobody living with him.
I don't know who his roommates might be, I don't know him, but he will have to plan out.
Right behind me.
If he goes grocery shopping, that has to be
Right next to
planned.
us.
Yeah, it's close.
Right next to, he probably lives in a halfway house. I've had problems with their staff. They don't watch them.
Yeah.
I had a guy looking in my I'm sorry, I don't mean to scare you, but I have a 4-year-old and I'm like,
Yeah.
really like, they don't watch them very good. They've been reprimanded by the police before. They had him verbally tell the lady, you need to watch this guy. And one of the staff was like, yeah, I don't usually worry about the guys, but he would have been one to worry about.
Yeah, definitely communicate any issues or concerns that you're seeing. If you're seeing them, not perceived, but like real, you know what I'm saying? Like if you see him out engaging in conduct or behavior that just seems problematic or could be potentially, we want you calling.
Okay.
You know, if you think there's an imminent threat, I got like 2 more slides. I promise. It's your question about ISR. Is it about ISR?
It's a,
Not about
it's
ISR.
a halfway house. So there's this
ISR.
Are there women involved that help make these decisions in this program?
Yeah, like supervision.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, we have female
I
agents.
mean, because some of this stuff doesn't look like what I would want presented.
Yeah, we have-
So I'm just wondering, I mean, if you need women to help, here I am.
We do pretty well with our law enforcement components and our supervision
I
components.
mean, what kind of education do we need to have to be involved in this?
To be an agent, a 4-year. You have to have a 4-year degree. Yeah. And we like a lot of experience, like direct supervision.
Okay.
So yeah, check it out. We get hurt. I know law enforcement can
No,
use some.
I'm not, well, I mean, I'm just thinking of what I'm hearing. And I just think that women need to have more input,
Fair.
because we're the mothers. We're the women that we're the victims. We're the target, we're the victims. I mean, even in my neighborhood,
Let's talk about resources just really quick, because that's all I have left, and then I will get out of the way and we'll do questions.
all right.
Because it sounds like resources are kind of coming up. We're talking about what kind of things we have out there for folks that want to learn more about this important topic, who want to apply it into their safety plans. So your first and probably most direct is going to be the ISR agent.
Okay.
He operates in a team. There's never not an agent on duty. And so certainly if you have concern or if you want to harass the man, go for it. I would call 911 at 3 a.m. if it's that big of an issue. That sounds really
Do
just.
you have any documents around here that has that number?
I don't think that's gonna.
That if there's something, I'm sorry, if there's something about it, those are the bad people. Not him, not that guy. That guy.
Okay, all right, other resources. All right. We'll talk about the 3 a.m. phone call after we're done with the slides. So if you have an immediate concern that someone or anyone, conduct or behaviors, your awareness has been slightly broadened tonight, is engaging in potentially harmful conduct, we want you calling 911. Law enforcement is your best and always most reliable resource. The Crystal PD is no stranger to this group of individuals, and they're exceptionally good at how they manage them. So do use them as a resource. If you have just general questions about how the agency operates, certainly call their non-emergency number. Other information that might be helpful is you're thinking about how to implement this into your family safety planning efforts. How do I talk to a kid that this is going to scare? Right here. You may think, I'm not a victim myself, but you do not need to be a victim. These individuals are fantastic at helping build out those age-appropriate conversations that can grow with your child. So you're avoiding those fear-induced I mentioned I would share some resources with you about how to look up backgrounds. The Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, you can look up anybody's criminal history, adult criminal history, if they're from Minnesota. All you need is their first name, last name, and date of birth. I encourage you to use him as a test subject. Go onto the site, look up public criminal history, type in his first name, last name, you can do your alias, because they all connect, and date of birth, and you'll get his criminal history for Minnesota. Our website here has all the research that I've been referencing and other hopefully helpful information. Check that out as well. If you have questions about how to get there, my card is in the back. Call me. It will absolutely help. As I've been just hammering you with information, and I know it is like trying to drink from a fire hose, I want you to know that there's so much good data out there, so much good resources. I encourage you to continue your education growth. Check out some of these resources here. They're also on the back table. Take extra. If you know of anybody that might be interested, we have them all listed on our website as well. So they're hopefully very accessible. I want to just wrap up my formal presentation part before the Q&A with what we call the 3 9 U's and 2 R's. As you're thinking about your resources, they're finite. The last thing I want for you to do tonight is to put all of your energy and effort on one individual. Know that once we've implemented our systems, overwhelmingly, we drop recidivism to the point where we can say confidently, since we've gone to determinate sentencing, 90% do not reoffend sexually once they've gone through that full array. 90% of those that do engage in this harm are known to the people they hurt. And that last 90 is the inverse of the first. If I took all 19,000 of these guys tonight and put them on the moon, I would have impacted sexual harm or recidivism by no better than 10%. So, again, broad awareness is key. Okay, I'm gonna hand it back over to the chief to run Q&A. We'll
One second, I just want to comment. We'll both take questions. I do want to comment on a couple questions that I received specifically. Again, the notification piece, I'll come back to, but I want to stick with this offender for now. What I will say is one of the questions that I get, the city we don't get to decide who comes here. So the question is, why did you allow him in? Well, as the person who is supposed to work with our team to police the community, this creates more issues. So if I could roll the dice, I might roll them differently. We have no say. The probation officer gets to sign off on a plan and they get to move wherever. That's what the statute says. So we simply are notified that the relocation is happening. That's one thing I would say. The second thing I would say is, while I can't, as Brad said, people know this, but while we can't say publicly, this is where this individual says, our staff know this. Our staff know all of this information and more because we get more information. And so our job is to make sure that our team is well versed on who this individual is, what are the requirements, who is the probation officer, if we have concerns as we're wandering around. And so I want to make sure that everybody understands that dynamic. And I was remiss in introducing Pete Underthun in the back. Pete's our deputy chief as well. So as we will take questions, but at the end, Pete and I will be around to answer.
So who decides what community these people go into? Are there as many in Edina and in Atrista as there is in Crystal?
So for those under supervision, they will submit a plan. And that plan will consist of where their resources are. And then usually caseworker on the prison side will review that plan, try to determine what, if any of those options may be permanent or prudent. And if none of them are, maybe try to find some additional resources and so on. Once they're off paper, or let's go to the next stage. Once they're out in the community, that process gets a little bit more expedited. So if they went into like a halfway house, those are short-term placements. They're not meant to be long-term housing options. Once they've kind of met those expectations, they then get to transition. So they'll, again, forward a plan to their agent. Here's some options. The agent may look at it and say, no, okay. And so, yeah. And let me tell you, as an agent, it's not an easy decision.
Because
So,
ultimately,
sure, why, are they going to
oh, are they going other places?
older communities, or do they take any in these upscale?
Yes, yes, very eagerly so, I assure you.
I just would like to state the fact that the end of confinement review committee who oversaw this individual had major lack of oversight as far as the degree of likely to force harm, the degree to likely physical have contact, the age of the likelihood of the victim, the number of prior offenses of the victim. These are all under the statutes of Minnesota. 2044.052.
Yeah, that's the Notification Act, and he's a 3,
Oh, I'm not
he
done.
can't be hired,
I'm not done
they
yet.
can't make him a 5.
It was a lack of oversight on that individual's provision.
Certainly,
Okay, so
email me.
as far as the proximity of his location, I have it also right here. It also states here in the law, Minnesota law, that subdivision 4A, the offender's location of residence. An offender is assigned to risk level 3, released from a confinement or residential facility to reside in the community of changes residence while unsupervised or conditional release. The agency is responsible for the offender's supervision shall take into consideration the proximity of the offender's residence, that all level 3 offenders of the proximity presence of the risk of reoffending. Number 2, take into consideration the proximity of the offender's residence of the following locations if the locations present risk of reoffending: schools, child care facilities, family or group homes, daycare programs, license of residencies for vulnerable adults, attractions within the public parks that are regularly used by minors, including but not limited to playgrounds or athletic fields. Map card, what is that?
Those were all taken into consideration.
They were not, that was a lack of oversight.
They were taken into
Okay,
consideration.
okay, well, I would like
You
the
have my
city of
card.
Crystal, to go on your charter and look, if you have a, residency restriction policy put into place, if there is a 2,000-foot park, playground restriction, or of schools, or of minors, it could be potentially on our charter. I know there was an adaptation that Brooklyn Center and Brooklyn Park did just not yet a few years ago. They implemented that in their city ordinance and charters, stating that if we were to take sex offenders of level 3, that they could not reside in 1,000 feet of a park or a school or ETC. So I would encourage our council members to look further into that. I did read under our city ordinances of 500 plus pages. I could not find a single thing. I went and found our city charter, which has not been revised since 1960. I did not see any laws that were implemented. We have the judicial right in our city to write this in. So when we are working with Hennepin County and Ramsey County, we can put up perimeters around this. If we're going to be part of this community to protect our residents that are hard tax-paying citizens, that are law-abiding citizens, to protect our innocent, to protect our children. I want to just encourage all of our city council members to please take that into consideration. I have contacted attorneys. I have connections with people that have been past judges in other states that have revised and looked into this. My grandfather was actually on the city council of Lino Lakes. He is no longer with me, but I have had great training over the years, and he has been on the DFL committees, and I'm just looking into laws and studying laws over the years. This is a passion of mine, and I just greatly want to encourage our council members. You guys are doing such an awesome job, and our police department, but please look into this and start putting up parameters within our community, and use the laws and the loopholes that we have at hand to start putting up parameters, okay?
I just want to say I appreciate your comments, and the mayor and I, we can both bring this up to the council. What's more, what speaks higher is when you guys come to our council meetings and address this at open forum.
As a working mom and a business owner, it's not always, I'm not always able to do
I understand
that.
that. If anyone is available, next council meeting is next Tuesday at 7 p.m.
If you would like any of my findings, I'm more than happy to email these to you. And these are some of the statutes and the lack of oversight done on Ramsey County's, oversight with them releasing us and us, Hennepin County accepting him. This was major
actually took the night off of work. I took 10 hours of PTO tonight. I work at Banner Engineering on 73rd and Boone. I work 4 10s. I cannot attend all these meetings. What are you gonna do for women and people that work on night shift? How can I attend these 7 o'clock meetings every time you have a meeting?
You really are televised, so you can look them up and watch them.
Well,
One thing, and you can always call any of us council members if you have a question, and we could bring that up for you at the meeting.
okay,
Because I certainly understand that.
yeah. I mean, it's not just Quail Avenue there's issues in Crystal.
All right.
5702 Adair Avenue, 57th Adair Avenue North has issues too.
Can you speak to the kind of supervision this guy's on right now?
Yeah, sure. So he's on intensive supervised release, and so it's a phased program. ISR is meant to be a year long, but for those that are designated level 3, they never phase them off. So they must retain their time on ISR until or unless their level gets reduced. And again, this guy's locked in. So at least through October of 2018, he'll be on that level of supervision. And so he has to get visitors have to be cleared, employment has to be cleared, walking routes, things like we talked about, shopping times, shopping locations, etc. All have to be pre-approved, and agents will take into consideration best ways to mitigate potential risks when and if things are approved. There are certain things he gets to do, so he gets to have physical fitness time. So he may not likely allow him to join a gym. I'm not the agent on this one, but I'm gonna tell you, probably not gonna happen. So his PT time will be served likely in more accessible locations that we allow. And so with GPS monitoring and agent oversight, we make sure they walk the paths that they say they're walking.
So he's on GPS monitoring.
He could be, I don't know who's on it, but they can be on and off of it anytime during their supervision. He's
So what are
subject
his
to-
obligations right now? Like, what are his obligations as part of his
To remain
role?
law abiding, to abide by his terms and conditions of release, which would include attending programming, aftercare, things of that nature, maintaining gainful employment if he's able to do so, and engaging in positive pro-social conduct and behavior. Ultimately,
And the house he's living at is like a transitional kind of halfway house. I mean, I
it
know
wouldn't
that. 'cause
surprise me if that's the case.
he lives
Usually
next door to
statutes
me.
Pretty limited in what they do.
Is there any obligation for this house to disclose who is living in there?
Notification is a sole authority of law enforcement. Only law enforcement can provide notification, and they can only do so within the purview of the level assigned.
We saw him, our neighbor saw him by himself, and I just don't understand how that's intensive.
I'm sorry.
I maybe not understand, but how's it intensive if he's by himself, like in the street? It's not being watched.
Oh, yeah,
thoroughly.
like, without somebody like with
Yeah,
him.
nobody was
He's
with
not
him.
under like a custodial type supervision where he's gonna have like a support staff with him 24/7.
Right. Probably should.
It's just, honestly, it's just not an option
What is
with,
that one more? So this place that he's living in, they have to have some kind of record that you can look up what their business is, what their.
Yeah.
yeah. And
You've
it's
done your
like-
due
it's-
diligence on that, like
It's
they're
little
legit.
doubt that they did do that, but you gotta remember too, what we're up against is homelessness. And so homelessness is the ultimate enhancer of risk. Ordinances that restrict proximity do nothing but increase homelessness because they can't live anywhere. And so, because here's the thing is once you start drawing circles around things, you're gonna have communities that are advantaged, you're gonna have communities that are not. So either the circles will have to get bigger or the things you described will have to change. And so eventually they can't live anywhere within the community, but they don't stop them from existing. Any ordinance you read will not say they can't be in those places. They say they can't live there.
So what I'm trying to ask is how do I figure out where this house, what their business is? If it's a business, they have to be registered somewhere.
Yeah, I imagine they feel like
So where do I go?
Secretary of State's.
State.
And then one more question, do we get notified if he moves?
If he leaves the community and law enforcement determines he will not come back, they may provide a notification similar to the initial one, where you're just saying heads up, he's left. But law enforcement has a big road to hoe to determine will he not re-enter the community. So usually those instances only occur if they left the state and really show them that they're never coming back, or deceased. Those are the two big ones.
So then, if I can respond, I'm sorry, one second, so I don't get confused, because there's not much going here. Two things. One would be, again, I don't have any control over what the supervising agent decides are the supervision requirements, where they can go, whatever, and we're also not informed of what, like, has to do this, That isn't information we get. That's it.
Is that the agent Joel Hansen, that number that you posted?
Yes.
That's his supervising agent?
Yes. That said, what I will say, and you've ever heard me speak in front of the community before, what I will say in this case, as I say in every case, we want the 911 call, period. So if something seems amiss, if you're like, why is dude standing in the middle of the street, we would rather get that call now and be able to go and figure out why is dude standing in the street, or in a broader sense, why is it 12:30 in the morning on the south half of the city and someone's wandering around looking in cars? It's easier for us to get the call now and figure it out than someone calls tomorrow and says, hey, this was happening. So again, in so much as what our team is able to do, it's to say, if it doesn't look right, if something about it is odd, I will encourage you to call 911, and our team will not grow weary of responding to those calls. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
Well, what happens in October when it expires then?
So
Because I feel like you're saying two things I don't understand.
Sure, yeah, that's a good question. So when he hits that expiration date, his rights are restored to him. There's no, it means, so right now he's under the jurisdiction of the Department of Corrections. The court has granted us authority to manage him. And they've given us a lot of latitude of what that looks like. And so we can basically tell him where he can work, where he can go and where he can't go. All the things that you as a private citizen get to do without anything. Where he can love him. Oh, yeah, where he can shop, where he can shop.
So does that mean when that expires, that he has to find somewhere else to live?
I don't know the specifics of his current living
No, it
situation.
just doesn't have anything to change.
It just,
He can go free.
So this doesn't sound like it's checking him now.
so I wanna just finish up, so once he hits expiration, yeah, so once he hits expiration, it's set by law. Okay, so once he's got his sentence, that's set by the court, that's the authority they have, and when that sentence expires, and it will expire, it's not a lifetime sentence, then his rights are restored to him, meaning he gets to live and do as any other law-abiding citizen does. That's the expectation, with the exception of the registry. He still has to register, law enforcement still knows where he lives, where he works, what he drives, and they can address any potential concerns.
So how do that home's not into him? We have families, and we have families.
It's just like judicial support.
We bang away at the gates of change every day, they can only be open from the inside. And so, unless or until he's decided he wants to implement these things into his life and mitigate his risk, we'll be there.
There was a slide that there was the offense he had, which was an aggravated robbery. It was not sexual. Do I have to be worried about him breaking that house?
Here's the thing, I don't do notifications on all ag robberies. I've never come to a community yet to tell neighbors of an ag rob. I can't even tell you how many ag rob convicted individuals live all over the state. So if you're asking me, as a notification coordinator who focuses on sex offending, to tell you if you should be concerned about other criminal conduct, sure.
If you go to that website, Mr. Professional, I looked him up, I went through everything's published, down Wikipedia, and you can read all of it. You can see what just drugs before the warrants were issued, not a lot of hot drugs, not a lot of. There's like, he's got a pretty big rap sheet, so all I gotta say is, just make sure the door's locked, and if you have your ADT thing, hit the button. All I know is that ISRs can supposed to be checked on 4 times a week, no drugs
Or more, yeah. And those contacts are higher.
But my thing is, there's always those kids at the playground, they always got the games over the corner.
So if you're observing, if he happens to be with a kid kids are out, let the agent know. Like, that shouldn't be happening. Like, he should.
So if I ever see him sitting outside at the holiday
If it
gas
seems-
station smoking a cigarette.
I mean, yeah, I would actually let him know, because I'd be like, what's he doing? He's not shopping. He's not on constructive time, he's just loitering. I would honestly let him know.
And to clarify, I think Brad gave the information on his agent. Certainly, your questions related directly to what can he do, what's he doing, what should he do, what can he do, like that should go there. But the examples that you're given, we have the agent's info as well, and we'll get a hold of that. And I would rather us not leave a voicemail for somebody about conduct that is concerning to us. I would rather get that call when it's occurring, and we will go ahead and you can rest assured have a conversation with that agent about how that needs to look. So I just want to clarify, I think the questions to the agent, certainly you can express your frustrations, and certainly you can ask whatever questions he will tell you, but if we're talking about conduct as it's occurring, I would almost need you to make that call when it's happening.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, my dad-
what's gonna end up happening is, you guys making that call, one of our officers going out and actually seeing what's going on, asking the questions, assessing it, looking at the record that we can look at in our spot computer, is to see if his behavior's in compliance or not. If it's not, we can scoop him up and put him on a probation.
Great.
So that's why I have calls.
I'll be watching for him.
So, our office, shows officers in our neighborhood on a regular basis. Our officers let them know that there
For everybody's sake, I just want to make sure everybody's hearing all the questions. So again, the question is, your finger up there, should you expect extra patrol up there during that time? And I'll go back to my prior statement, which is the officers all know where he lives. And so in terms of visible presence, yes, the discussion that we had with the staff when we got the information was, we have this person here, and our obligation is to make sure that we're doing our piece of keeping eyes on that.
I would have to say, I have seen increased patrols in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
And I would say too, just to reiterate what we talked about earlier, and sometimes you get lost in the stats and things, but the fact of the matter is you may have anywhere from 3 to 6 cops on duty in this town at any given time. And you all know how long it takes us to get from one end of town to the other if that lights and siren on going 65. You have to be everywhere, patrolling every road at all times. So you guys are the most important thing in our community is your eyes and your ears, understanding this, and knowing the people that are in your neighborhood, if something doesn't look right, call us. That allows us to respond. We can't, as much as we might patrol our neighborhood, there's people that sit and watch away from the cops.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really
That's
good.
true. That's true.
So we need you guys.
I just know that we have typically not have a lot of patrols coming through our area, because we are kind of like, we're kind of isolated from the rest of the city. And we're nice people, yes. But, you know, we're kind of cut off from the rest of the city, so we have yes.
So, any other questions?
To ensure that he's abiding, I mean, I know he's got all those restrictions, but does he have an ankle bracelet, or how is that?
I don't know if it's actively on him at this moment, but it could be. If it's not, it can be reapplied. So if the agent determines that he's engaging in conduct or behavior that he can no longer reliably count on, so for example, if I had approved a plan to go shopping at a certain time, right? And I went to that shopping location and I come back and observed him, and he doesn't show up or something like that. And then I go to his house and I say, where are you at? He says, I'm shopping. No, you're not. If you are, you're not where you were supposed to be. That's enough of a violation for me to apply the GPS. Because then I can go to the hearings and release unit, they're the governing agency of the DOC, and say, I have real concern that he's in the community, engaging in conduct that he's trying to keep hidden from me. at the very least, that may be potentially harmful or risky, ergo, I need my GPS back on. And they'll usually set it back on for a certain predetermined time frame, and I can start to track and monitor them again. Other things we use, phones, cell phones. He is approved to have a phone, but that phone is monitored and checked. He cannot turn off the phone's tracking function. If he turns that off, it's a violation, he goes back. So anytime I take that phone, I should hit track and I can see exactly where he's been. If it doesn't jive with my GPS, that's a violation. So we're using a lot of cross-references. And so it's important to understand that while the monitor feels good, it doesn't prevent behavior, right? It doesn't stop anything. If he cuts that bracelet, he's in the wind. We know where he last was, we'll find it in the trash. And we'll give law enforcement the pings, and then OSI, we have our own police force that will stand in and help out. So it's not just Crystal PD either, I can't emphasize that enough. They do not stand alone against this group of folks. If they mean to be nefarious. We have OSI, especially for level 3s on active supervision. I don't know if you've had the pleasure of meeting them, we call them our true door kickers. We have yet to have somebody on warrant for more than 24 hours. They will find them, and they're very good at it. And I don't care about what state they're in either. The governor's warrant will ship them back. They cannot run from us. But they will expire. So I don't want to make it sound like this big chest thumping Brad up in the corner is always going to be a problem. But here's the thing, is we hope sincerely with these processes that he's internalized enough that he doesn't want to be back here. He doesn't want to do this, and he's going to keep himself quiet. Whether or not he can do that is to be determined. But here's the thing, hope springs eternal at the DOC, because ultimately he does get the ability to re-enter society. We just hope that we're setting him up for success. If not, we want to be the first to catch him and get him back where he needs to be, if that's the case. And that's where Ivan years are the best. So even if he left tonight, I would not want your awareness to diminish at all. We want you to remain aware, because here's the thing, you saw from the numbers, just how many live around here. They're coming in and out of communities all the time. And even though Brooklyn Center has an ordinance, they're there too. And they're entering and leaving communities there. They're visiting friends and family members. It feels good, but it only just confounds our efforts to create stable environments that are safe. And so, that's what we're up against. So,
I don't know anything about half that. It's temporary, right?
Yes.
Is there any uniformity to the temporary status? Is that 3 months or 4 years? What's that?
So when his stuff expires, does he get to still keep living there? Like, who's paying for that currently? Like, we're paying for
I don't
him to
know.
stay there?
Sure, we are.
The answer, I don't know the specifics of that particular dwellings arrangement. But I believe the technical answer to your question would be that yes. I don't know who's paying for it. I'm saying I believe that he could stay there after he's done with his supervision. But I have no idea what his payment arrangement is. The other piece that I would throw out in the midst, there are, let me segue this, and I don't want to go too far this way because this is a whole other part of my world that I could do without. But currently in Crystal, we have about 100 congregate care facilities that we're aware of, i.e. group homes. And they are all over. My intention, I've been pretty vocal about it, is it is not regulated correctly. The entities that are supposed to be regulating them as care facilities, a little different than this, are not doing their job well. We have leaned very hard in the last year to course correct one at a time on the ones that we're dealing with. The council is very frustrated and has been trying to, with a consortium of other cities in the area, trying to get the legislature, because the legislature made some changes a couple years ago that really hamstrung cities to control those. So we don't have control over that, although I will tell you that we're putting pressure hard on those homes when they become high utilizers or we see care that's falling between the cracks. The parallel would simply be that our expectation is that if you are a group home type facility that's doing some type of care, whatever that might be, whoever it is that's there, our expectation is that you're doing what's expected of you. So insert whatever population you might put to that. We will continue to, as best we can, exert pressure on saying there's expectations of how you manage the people that if you have very, very acutely ill people and you're not equipped to manage it, regulate most of those congregate facilities. Not necessarily well, but those are where they tend to register. So,
And just if the new DHS is spinning off its group that manages those types of facilities into a whole nother division. So it's a mess right now over there. So we'll see what that is. Hopefully it resolves some of those issues.
Yeah, that group home issue for Crystal is, and the surrounding communities is really, really a struggle. Because again, we cannot license them, we cannot go and inspect them. We have an ordinance on the book, if you're a renter or you own a property and you're renting it, if you have 3 calls for service and within a 1-year period that are, just kind of like loud music, we can revoke the rental license. And that's what happened in New Hope a couple of years ago. Because they had a group home that was totally out of control. And because they revoked it, New Hope, the state legislature changed it and essentially, in my opinion, took the control away from the local communities. And, the state does not do a good job overseeing many, many things. For instance, like the feeding program, the autistic, the senior daycare. And so I guess my question to you is, there are so many that are poorly run and not being kept on, track. How can I believe you? I mean, I don't mean you were very,
That's a fair question. It's tough.
It bothers me.
Well, here's what I'll tell you, is that while the state in its monolithic status appears to be one functioning algorithm, it is not. It is a bunch of independent agencies and organizations all kind of scrambling for the same chunk of change from the same trough, if you will, the same offer. And so with the Department of Corrections, I can only speak to our house. We keep our house in order by ensuring that if it is a DOC-run facility, that we absolutely are checking on. It's a DOC-managed facility. Now, unfortunately, when the DOC shows up in a community and says, we'd like to purchase a property, guess what the community says? It's a good guess. You guys have been around. No one wants them, period. And my phone rings every day there, and it's yet to be with somebody that has a suggestion that goes beyond a wood chipper or mutilation. That's where they all get to go. And I don't have that authority either, thank God. So how can you trust it? I suppose.
Mayor, I would simply say that, as you know, I am not a big fan of the state bureaucracy in terms of how it helps the community in most cases. But this individual is the 6th level 3 offender we've had in my 7 years here, and I will say that I have had zero concerns about the oversight and supervision that has been provided, imparted, imposed on, whatever, on all of those prior individuals. Brad is not lying, and I would be the one to say it if he was. Brad is not lying about supervision.
I have a question.
I just wanted to quickly add, just so everybody's aware, so I deal with Hennepin County GIS a lot, so that's a publicly available website. So you don't necessarily have to go to a county physical building to look up somebody's property. You can do that all online, and you can basically do it 24/7. So, and then GIS, like, it has a map of the entire county. You can just, if you can find the person's property, it should list the owner and write the history of the property. So,
That's me. I have a question as to, like you were talking out earlier, and I didn't realize there was a problem with notification until my daughter from Bloomington sent me this information. Do you think this should not have been mailed to the residents within a mile of him or something?
So what I will say, and again, I'm
Like, there
not.
would have been a lot more people here if people knew about it. None of my neighbors know about this.
Sure. So what I will say moving forward, I'm not, again, I'm happy to offline chat with you about what the last 3 weeks has entailed. I don't think any of you care. As I started the conversation, our commitment is to make sure that we do this right. So what I will tell you is moving forward, every time we receive notification, I will caveat, typically we receive it ahead of time. That is not always the case. Sometimes they've moved when we receive the notification. That's rare, but it does happen. It has happened at least. We will do a notification forum like this every time. And we will hand deliver, as we did this notice, so that the people in proximity do that. We have to, I mean, to be honest, we have to, we try to, right, wrong, or indifferent, figure out what's the affected area. Mailing is, in a nutshell, mailing is not the most effective way to get to everybody who lives in this community, because we have lots of non-owner occupied residences. There's lots of deals. In this case, making sure that we hand delivered that second notice that had the letter for me was that we could ensure that we knew that every mailbox we needed to got it. That will be our protocol moving forward. We will do this exactly in this format moving forward. Our plan as well would be, Brad, someone asked and Brad mentioned, we will make notification when we get notified that someone has moved out. That said, I believe 2 of those 5 previous individuals moved out and then moved back in. And so that's when Brad's talking about the conundrum. My observation has been there's a little bit of transientness in some of that movement. So that means that will re-trigger, that we will do this again. In this case, if I get Brad calls tomorrow and says he's out, great, and 3 months later he's back, we'll do this again. But we are committed that that's the right thing to do it. If we have to do it every 6 months, because that's when he moves back in.
So you only notify like 2 blocks?
This one, the notification, I believe, was a 3 square block radius. And then we will do this separate.
Bass Lake Road and it's like 2.5 blocks away from there. None of my neighbors knew about it.
So the other piece is, and again, I will take feedback. I will be honest in saying, again, I don't want to make excuses. Widespread community notification is difficult. It's just hard because of the different ways. One of the things that I will ask you all to write down as you walk out of here is we are just implementing a new communication initiative that it's out of my head. Smart 911. Smart 911 is a new notification that we are using. We are trying to direct people to that platform. And so moving forward, our plan is we will do social media, we will do website, we will do hand deliveries as best we can. If you are signed up for city email, we will use that. We're going to try every way we can, short of us having the staff to hand deliver to every residence in the city.
It's finally starting to get more young families in and more children, and I want to see it stay that way and be safe for our families.
Yep.
So when were you notified that he moved in? What date were you guys?
I don't have all the dates, but I'm going to say July 18th, right? Somewhere in that ballpark.
And why were we just notified last week?
Again, I'm happy to go through kind of the rigmarole, and simply I will just say, yeah, I'm simply going to take ownership for that and say it was not acceptable. So again, I got a handful of explanations of how it evolved, but I don't think the excuses are helpful for
I
anybody.
understand. So that's what you were apologizing for in the beginning. I didn't know what you were apologizing for.
My apologies is
Okay.
that we did not do this meeting, and that we had some issues with the notification.
Okay.
And I have heard loud and clear, rightly so, that the expectation is higher, and that will be the standard that we will use moving forward.
Thank you.
I have a question as far as like notification, so, I mean, I don't have kids in the school districts and stuff, I did make note, just for morning walks and stuff, that there are designated pickup zones within our neighborhood.
Bus stops.
Yeah, bus stops, yeah, for the children. Was that school notified as far as within those zones, so the parents are aware that there is a level 3 sex offender neighboring around? Just for the protection of those children seem like it's got a fetish for women. And, there's some girls that definitely look like they're of age and they're not, and, it could be very predatory or, mothers and stuff that we farm. I just see a lot of kids that aren't supervised with any parental structure around that.
We do proximal school identifications, but that's a good suggestion.
Yeah.
For sure.
Okay. Thanks.
Fully aware, the community knows he's in that.
Yes. I mean, I was, yeah, there you go. That's a great question. That comes back to, a lot of times, law enforcement people will say, what is the real purpose of doing these? Because let's just be really honest, they suck. They really are uncomfortable, they're hard.
no one walks away feeling good, but that's really not the goal, right? It's to be aware. And so one of the answers is if you if you understand like the Big Brother, the concept of constant observation and vigilance, that's what we're leveraging. So when we apply this stigma, this ick, get him out of here, he's gross, he can't be anywhere. What we're leveraging is his ability to create relationships with us. We know what we know, and what we know is he's accessed both of his victims by being trustworthy. We've taken that away. He will never be trusted, at least with an aware group. You'll never give him a ride or accept a ride from him. You will never fall asleep next to him on a bus bench. Not gonna happen. And so the mission is to enhance that awareness, right? Could he potentially attempt to engage in other conduct or behavior? Sure. Like I say, as long as they're breathing, there's a risk, right? But that's where the awareness comes in. And so, ultimately, does he know? You bet he does. He will assume that every eye that falls on him knows exactly who he is. One other thing that I would say to piggyback on that, I say this carefully, and I'm saying it. If you know me, you know that I try to talk to people the way I would talk to my family. That's what I ask our cops to do. If you're arresting someone, I want you to treat them the way you would treat your family member. So it is in that spirit that I'm saying this. Part of the concern for a public safety leader on a level 3 notification is not that the level 3 notification should happen. It's that everybody on the south end of the city who currently doesn't have any level 3 offenders goes, we're good. And P&I exists in our staff because, unfortunately, you're not good. And so this is good because it's helpful, but part of me wants you to recognize, yeah, you have a picture now of the problem. I'm going to suggest to you that if I go this way, there are people that I don't have pictures of that are problems. I say that only in so much as to say what I want to encourage is always, he moves out a month from now, I would like to encourage you to be vigilant and aware and letting us know as things are happening. Because the other thing I would point out, this sounds silly, and I don't mean it silly, but all of these numbers started as a 0. They weren't an offender until they were an offender. And so I want our community to be aware all the time. And in this case, we now have a tool of a face that we should be concerned with. So I just point that out that I think, as I said earlier, I want calls for 911 when anything weird is happening. Something doesn't seem right. The hair on the back of your neck is telling you something. We want those calls now so that we can figure it out.
Speaking of facial hair, why is it when like we take pictures of them, like why can't they we can take a picture of you with your facial hair, but you're required to shoot it and let's take a picture of it before you're released. Get your little passport and your mom didn't have her bangs on her head. Why don't we do that? Every hairstylist and people look so different with facial hair.
It's
Jaw
true.
structure, things like that, side profiles.
You throw a wig on.
We should do that. We should
do a
make
ball
a
cap on it.
And that's a really good point.
That's not fair.
It's hard to get agents out on this to take pictures. They're like, Brad, we got so much more we're doing. We're checking for devices. We're checking for contact, and I'm over there. Get a picture. Get a picture. Give me a picture. And so I have a hard. I'm gonna go with an agent's front, and if I say, can you make sure he shaves half his face? Here's what I will say. I think it was a really good. Photos are helpful to an extent. We know you can modify an appearance pretty quickly without a whole lot of input. A bottle of hair dye, some contact lenses, and a wig or whatever. I think yeah. Here's what I'll say is it's hopefully better than nothing. And he's more on that impulsive side, so it's likely he won't have manipulated his appearance prior to potentially engaging in.
I just say in general.
I hear you.
So I'll just add to that too, we have a predatory offender supervisor on our team who coordinates not only our level 3s, but our 2s and our 1s in town too. And so our agency goes through and we do checks every year, home visits, update vehicles, update employment, get new photos, do all those things. I'll do the same with this person, so there will be updated photos. We do keep up on all these folks, we know where they live. We've got files that we can search quickly for out on the street. We stop somebody, we enter it into our system, we know who they are, what they've been up to, and who, if they're affiliated with this local system. So, the main thing,
For the 4,000?
he's the supervisor. All of our cops do this.
Oh, that's just the supervisor?
Yeah,
Okay.
so when we do these checks, all of our cops get assigned two discrete offenders. They go out, they blanket the whole city and they check in with all the offenders. And then oftentimes, you know, as we're doing these checks, maybe we find somebody from that building where they said they were. We put together a prosecution package, we send that up to the state and try to be charged for being non-compliant. Or we try to locate them and recommend it. So maybe it's something small like license. But big thing just to piggyback on these two guys said is, it's uncomfortable. I don't want this in my neighborhood either, right? Nobody does. But there's not a lot we can do to change it. And I've been through it in my own neighborhood at home, I don't like it at all. But our commitment is that if you guys call, we're gonna come.
I would just like to say that we've had to call the police a couple of times in Crystal for whatever, like a medical emergency or whatever. And you guys have always been there and been very quick. And so I appreciate that.
I appreciate that, and as I mentioned earlier, I related to this or anything else. My number is there and it gets answered, so, if something isn't going the way you expect it to, I just had a conversation with our staff last week. The expectation is that we follow community expectation, and so if we don't get it right all the time, I am unfortunately, as my wife would be really quick to tell you, but we try to get it right, and when we don't get it right, we admit we get it wrong, and we do better, and that's what I can commit to you. And so, if at any point you have had, not just about this, something that has not met your expectation, Peter and I will gleefully, and I'm saying that sincerely, take that call because we want to continue to push ourselves to be excellent. Correct, yes. It's a great question though, right? It changes. You'll want to talk to the agent because it depends on when his work is. So if he works overnights, his curfew will be at a different time schedule. So it's going to depend a lot on what he's doing for treatment and for work. So it is a dynamic moving curfew, so do follow up with the agent on that. But yes, as far as, yes, it has to be within, I mean, if he says I want to go walk through the park at midnight, no, the park's closed, dusk till dawn, dude. It's not happening. I want to walk the neighborhood. Like, no, what do you think that, so I go to talk to these guys before they release from prison, and like, they get super excited. They've been so therapized, they've been institutionalized for years, and they're like, Brad, I'm gonna get up, I'm gonna join the community garden. I'm like, no, you're not. No, that's not happening for you. And so there's a lot of like helping them understand that they have diminished not only their victims, but themselves as well. Their humanity was called into question, along with the harm they perpetrated. And that while their victims are restored as quickly and as best we can, theirs will be a lifelong climb. And they'll be lucky if the community allows them to have that semblance, and they best just expect to exist quietly. And that is the real goal. So when they submit a plan, they gotta give it to me. I want to know all the details. And as time goes, it's not just necessarily throw hurdles at them. Their life is difficult, and not to like try to evoke like empathy or anything here. I'm just saying they're having a tough time too. No one's hiring them, no one's renting to them. They're in dire straits. So they're pretty dependent. They become very institutionalized, and they come to me and say, "Brad, fix me." I'm like, I don't have what you need, but we can help you be safe. And so one of those things is safe engagement in their community. Hopefully they can start to reconnect with people that are appropriate adults who understand who they are, to try to reintegrate, because that is genuinely what changes behavior. To be pushed so far to the fringe. One thing they're told when they're under all of this imposed sanctions is that it will end. Do the right thing. Show up. Do the hard work in treatment. Talk about the things you've never talked about, and you will find that your life can be restored to some extent. If that doesn't happen at the end, we lose compliance, because
that looming threat will go away. And if they can't re-engage, they're gonna have to meet their needs. You know, it's Maslow's hierarchy. You know, they've got to be able to have shelter, food, clothing, the basics. And if they can't, they'll find a way. And so that's one of the things we try to work with them too.
Do these sign agents, would they ever take like a Zoom call for like our community and our neighbor side down if we like organize Zoom? Just so we can kind of go over like the regulations that this individual.
Certainly something worth asking. I mean, I can't say when we're.
After the city or something, might be easier than people may just scared to ask. Too scared to call the cops because they're like, well, I don't want to call and then it not be a rule and it doesn't.
I love the idea, but I've been an agent for 20 years, okay? And so I can hear my fellow agents in my head going, you shut your mouth, Brad. Because usually, you guys are intimidating, okay? And it's hard being an agent. They can't be homeless, and I've got pressures from the court. He comes out. And if he doesn't come out, that's a habeas case, the state gets sued, and guess what? When the state gets sued, they start looking for why they got sued. Why did I get sued? Well, Brad wouldn't approve anything. Well, because he sucks. He can't live anywhere. The guy's a jerk, you know? And it's like, so at some point, I'm just saying, you gotta hold your nose. So these agents have to make tough choices. And the last thing I want to do is throw an agent up in front of a community going, how dare you?
Well, something maybe just put in your little email box.
You can talk to me.
I'll do is, I guess, one suggestion, not to repeat myself, but, I mean, I get the what ifs, like, what if this or what if this. The reality is, if you called and said, he's in this spot, or he's out at this time, if you call us, we will do the diligence to find out, is this okay or not? That's, I'm guessing, will be the easier comments. Certainly. Yes.
In today's world of short staffing, how many people could this guy oversee?
That's a great
How do I feel confident that when I call him, it's not gonna be 2 weeks down the road because that's how you call him. No, but if I have a question, that is the 911.
Yeah, so, thank you. So, it is set by law that for ISR, intensive supervised release, caseloads cannot exceed 15 registrants per agent. And there must always be 2 agents per ISR unit. So somebody is always on. Now, you made a great point. Can we afford that? The answer is no, we broke. And so, agents are doing the best they can. They would love to have their caseloads lower. And to give you some perspective on caseload size, a typical supervised release caseload for a single agent is around 50 to 60 sex offenders. And that's pretty manageable, having done it for years. ISR to have 15 is hyper-focused. Like, you know everything about this person. You know their ins, their outs. You know more about their triggers than they do, and you hope that they internalize that stuff eventually. So, right now, ISR is capped by law, but there's also a competing law that says individuals that are designated level 3 have to be on ISR, so we have to take them out. And right now, there is no budget to take on new ISR agents. There's a need. There's vacancies and openings. You know, one woman was asking about being an agent, but there's no funding. There's no, so it's damn if you do, damn if you don't. Other duties as assigned. So I get pulled into the office tomorrow. Like, guess what?
Other duties as assigned.
Again, thank you everybody for being here. Pete and Brad and I will stay, and I'm gonna dime out the mayor and council member Camish. If you want to speak with them, you guys welcome. You're welcome to chat with them. We'll stay as long as we want to go, but certainly want to be cognizant of people's time. So thank you again for taking the time to be here tonight. Thank you, everybody. And that's kind of our consensus too. It's like, it's not.
So, I have a question. Are you like,
We don't need another one as far as the free locating. I reached out to some people, I slightly not, I talked to Julie, our mayor, I know, but I'm nice. That's why I'm saying. But I mean, I won't get nice and bring it here. That was my big problem. But here you're driving.